Hi, my name is Delana Skulls. I'm from the Blackstone Ward in the Ririe stake. I've been asked to create this gardening video for those of you who just want to learn how to garden or want to try it for the first time this year. So I want you to keep in mind as you watch this video that I am not a professional gardener. I am not a horticulture major. But what I do love is gardening, and I love it. And I learned everything from my dad. And from what you're going to learn from this video today, you're going to see the things that I learned from my dad. So just 1 second, I'm going to share with you some things that might help you as you start your garden. So my topic today is gardening, grow your own food. My dad always said that happiness must be grown in one's own garden. And I have to tell you, this is absolutely true. And you have to determine what kind of happiness that you're going to have in your garden. And you can define what garden is to you. Let me introduce you to my mom and my dad. Now, my dad was an avid gardener, and his dad died when he was 12 years old. And he had to learn how to garden really quick. He had to learn how to work hard. And he had 11 other brothers and sisters that taught him how to work and to help support and sustain their mother while they were having a big family. My mom, on the other hand, was the canner of the garden. So as my dad and I would go out and would plant the garden and we'd do all these things with my other brothers and sisters, my mom would get us up at the crack of dawn when harvest season came, so that we would pick those beans and snip the beans, wash the beans, would put them in the bottles, and she would can them. And in the wintertime, we would have a plethora of food to eat. And it really did look pretty on the shelves in those bottles all lined up. Now, my dad always said, you need to know your grow zone, and just don't buy things just because they're pretty. You need to know your grow zone. And if you look at this map over here on the right, we are Jefferson County. And if you look up here to the grow zones here, we are in the middle of 3 and 4. So when you are looking for trees and shrubs for your garden, make sure that you are picking the plants that will be hardy enough to survive a winter here in eastern Idaho. Now, some of the vocabulary you're going to want to know is the word annual, biannual, and perennial. An annual plant is something that you plant every single year. Those are things that you plant in your garden, like your potatoes, tomatoes, carrots, and peas, onions, all those things you put in your garden. And a biennial plant is those trees or shrubs that produce fruit. And usually the first year it's just growing, trying to get its roots down and producing a root system, its leaves. And the second year, you will get usually plants and fruits off of that. And a perennial plant is something that is in your garden, such as your shrubs, peonies, your irises, your bleeding hearts. Those are things that come back year after year. Now, my dad loved to buy treated seed, and I never understood why corn was pink or peas were pink or whatever. But treated seed is seed that has been coated with a fungicide that keeps the bugs and the other little things that crawl in the dirt from eating your seed before it has a chance to germinate. Now, pelleted seed is something that I have learned within the past 15 to 20 years. Pelleted seeds are seeds that they take and they put this inert clay around. And by the time that the seed has enough energy to start germinating, that outside covering it dissolves into the soil, and your seed has a better chance of germinating and growing. Now, one of the examples that I use is carrots. Carrots are such a small little seed that most of the time you can't even see where you've put that in the ground. So we buy pelleted seeds so that we can space our seeds out a little better and know where they're put. So when harvest comes, we're not pulling carrots out of the garden that look like a cow's udder. We have beautiful straight carrots that are beautiful and are pretty to look at. Now, I grow my own seeds in the house, such as my tomatoes and my peppers. And this is a tomato plant. And you'll probably wonder why I grow seeds in the house instead of buying them. It's because they're super spendy. And I can grow these and get the thrill of looking out on a winter day and have these sitting in my windowsill and they're growing. And I grew up learning that these little hairs on a tomato is actually roots. They're not roots. They're a thing called a trichome. It's a trichome. And what those are little hairs on the tomato plant. And so what it does, it is a defense mechanism for the little bugs that like to crawl up your plants and eat them. And what that does is it makes little bugs itch and they don't like it. And so they won't crawl up your plants. Now, what does grow into a root is the little tiny white nodes that you see in here. And then there's a couple of on the back. And what will happen is when you plant that tomato up to where another inch or two up, that you will get a better root system, that those nodes will start to grow into a root system that will help base your plant and have a better yield. Now, this is a pepper plant. And pepper plants, when you go to plant them, you'll need to plant them right at the base of the plant. And what you'll need to do is remove these little leaves. This is called their first leaves, and you'll need to remove those as you plant them just to the base, because if you get dirt around these plants, it starts to mold and mildew, and it will affect the rest of your plant. So just make sure you take off those first little leaves and plant them at the base of the plant. Now, I like to talk about seeds a lot because I love to seed shop, and I'm seed shopping the day after Christmas because now I'm wanting spring so bad. And I love to plant cylinder beets. And some people might never heard of a cylinder beet, but these beets right here, these are the new beets that I love to plant. These over here are the traditional beets that I grew up with. Now, the difference between this beet and that beet is the cylinder beet grows like a carrot. And when you go to cut your beets and you put them in your pots or your jars, they're all consistently shaped. And they taste really good and they're pretty. These beets over here, when they get a little bigger, they start to get a little woody and you can't cut through them. They won't cook and they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. The only thing these beets over here are going to do is get longer and you'll just be able to cook them normally and cut them up and all the slices will be the same size. I just like them and it's just something for you to think about. Now, one of the things we need to do is just make sure that you are reading your packages. It's kind of like shopping for groceries. You need to read the contents or see the instructions for cooking that food. So on these pea seeds over here, you'll see that this harvest is from 60 to 65 days. That's a good average for peas. So if you were to plant these on Memorial Day, you would be eating these in July. Now, the good thing about peas is they're a cold climate seed, and you can plant those anytime you can start rototillering or work in the soil. And even if they do get covered with a light covering of snow, they'll still produce great peas. And they do like full sun, and you can plant them in the early spring or fall summers. And so if you were to plant peas in March and got through your seeds through June, you would still have time to plant a second crop of peas. Now, this sweet corn over here, you'll notice that it's an 89-day corn. Now, that's actually 3 months. So let's say you plant that on Memorial Day. You won't get this corn until at least the first or the second week of September, which is getting really close to our danger of frost. And what you need to do is make sure that the corn is planted when the soil is warm. They are a warm climate seed and they like warm soil. So make sure that your soil is warm before you do that. So they'll germinate faster. 89 days is a long time. So you'll need to make sure that that is one of the first corns you plant as soon as all danger of frost is over. Now, these are the early bush contender beans, and these are bush beans. And what you need to make sure is that they are bush beans versus staking beans, because staking beans have to be on a trellis And if you forget or don't read your instructions, you'll have the mistake I made early on, that they just keep getting taller and taller and taller. And then one morning you go out and they've fallen over and they've already mildewed and ruined your entire crop. So this is a bush bean, and they are an early bean, which is 51 days from the time you plant your seed to the day you harvest it. Now, the great thing about bean is you don't just pick it once and they're done. Now, beans you can pick every 7 to 10 days, and you can have up to 4 pickings of beans. And won't those look really nice as you are canning those beans? And they look great on the shelf, and you have food to eat during the winter. Now, corn. I still love corn. It's one of my favorite garden vegetables. This one is a 70 days to maturity plant. And it does take 7 to 10 days to germinate from the day you get this. But this is the corn that if I was to plant on Memorial Day, that I would get this corn by August 10th. And that is my son's birthday. And it has been tradition that we have corn on his birthday every year. Now, I keep saying Memorial Day because that has been the word my dad always used, Memorial Day. If you plant your garden before Memorial Day, you'll plant it twice. I've had to do that several times because sometimes you think you're smarter than your dads. And we've done it several times. Oh, look, the 1st of May, it's looking really pretty. Let's plant our garden. And then the middle of May, it freezes and you lose everything, and you will plant your garden twice. And sometimes you can't find garden seed after that first nice spring freeze. So keep in mind the days of maturity for your vegetables, because you want it to fit within our 90 to 95 day of summer of growing season. Now here's a winter squash. It's an early acorn hybrid, and it's a semi-bush type. Now most squash, they like to grow out like a pumpkin, and they take out all your other things, and they need a lot of space. But this is a semi-bush type, which means that it will have a bush like a zucchini. So it will be stabilized here, but then it will have little feelers that go off onto it, but it will still keep within its 36 inches of space. And it does say it's container friendly, but your container needs to be really super big because the plants do get pretty sizable. Now on the back of Burpee Seeds, they will have a map of the United States and the time zones or the grow zones of when you should be planting this seed. So we should be planting in May, this seed. Cucumbers are probably my most favorite, and they're early. And you can eat cucumbers all summer long if you are picking every single day. And cucumbers are one of those that grow really super fast. They're like a zucchini. And you need to be picking when they're small and they don't get so big that the seeds inside are big and yucky. So this is a cucumber. It's a burpless beauty, and they get a good, about that long, 8 to 9 inches long. And they do like well-drained soil. They love water. And those of you who have ever planted a cucumber and didn't keep it watered found out that your cucumbers were bitter and they were bad all the way through the whole harvest. So just make sure you water your cucumbers often. Now, the first thing you need to do when you go to garden is that you need to prepare your soil. So at the end of every fall, my husband will mow the lawn, and he'll take all those grass clippings and he'll throw them in the garden and spread them out, and then he'll rototiller them in. And then in the spring of the year, he will rototiller the garden several times. Now this middle picture here is the second time he has rototillered, and we'll rototiller a third time before we plant our garden. But get someone who can rototiller, who's got deep tines on the rototiller, who can pull up and circulate the soil and get that aerated. Now, some of you will think my garden soil looks pretty awesome and that it's perfect soil, but we've had to work this soil. We've been in this garden for the last 27 years, and we're still picking rock. We're still plethora of weeds, and we have to keep adding nutrients to this soil because your plants eat up all the nutrients in the soil. So you need to make sure you're putting humate on it, fertilizer on it, so that your garden is growing and constantly having nourishment to it. Now, after we rototill the garden, we always put our garden into rows. We bring up the soil and we put it into rows. And one of the reasons for that, as my dad would say, where would you like to put your little roots if your garden wasn't very aerated? So what we like to do is we like to put our garden into rows. And then here you'll see in this picture here that Keith is making a little furrow, or a little, what do we want to call that? A ridge in our garden here, just a little furrow in the row so that we can place our seeds. And he's not putting them very deep, but he's putting it deep enough that we can take the ground and scoop it up into the middle and then tamp it with the rake so that it's pushing those seeds into the ground so that they will germinate faster. And the deeper it is into the soil after tamping, the warmer the soil gets, the faster that they're going to germinate. Now, here's a picture of Keith planting pea seeds. And that's the little furrow that he made in the row. And he's placing those pea seeds according to the instructions on the package. Now, if I was planting those pea seeds, they'd be double that, because I want peas that are going to grow and support themselves. But here he's planted those seeds according to the package. Now, this third picture here, this is corn. It needs to be treated a little bit different. Now, this is treated corn as well, so that the fungicide is on the seed already. And you'll notice that we didn't plant it in furrows, but corn needs to be planted a foot apart because it needs that much space to grow and to branch out. Now you'll notice that we put 4 to 5 seeds in each little shovelful, so that when they grow, they are growing as a support system with that many, so that they have a better yield. And when the wind blows, they don't come tumbling down at the first slight wind. Now, speaking of the deepness of the seeds, here's a closer look at some cucumber seeds that are being planted, and the ground is already moist. You want to plant in ground that is already damp, not dry. And so when you get done, you're just going to put a light topping of soil on top of your seeds and tamp that down so that those seeds are now inside that moist ground. Now, here's an example of corn. If you plant too deep, which this first picture is, your corn has to grow a little, it's got to be stronger, it's got to be tough, because it's got to now push through too much soil to get up to the ground. This one over here to the far right, this is too close to the surface, and now the roots are above the ground, and when you go to water it or whatever, it's going to wash those roots to the surface, and it could possibly damage your stalk and make it weak. And then you need to consider the second one where they've got it maybe an inch or two down into the ground. Corn is a little more hardy that way. It just doesn't want to be more than that, but plant it so it's going to have the room to grow and still have a good yield. Now, keep in mind, don't plant corn by the singles. Plant it 3 to 4 seeds, 3 to 5 seeds, so they have a sufficient stock support. And you're still going to get a great yield on your corn because it has the support system, and you can get anywhere from 3 to 5 ears of corn off of your stalks. There is nothing more fun to me than watching my garden grow. There's been times we sit out there and we get right up to the eyeball and we are watching our corn grow. And this right here is peas growing and pushing through the ground. And there are some nights when we've set the sprinklers out to hit the garden that we are sitting in the lawn chairs, the sprinklers hitting the garden, and we're eating popsicles. And you can seriously, if you are listening, you can hear your corn grow. I'm not kidding on that. It's true. You'll have to try it. Look at the size of these carrots. Now, this is last October. This is after one of the frosts that we had, and we didn't have snow yet. And Keith went out and picked the last of the carrots, and they were incredibly sweet. After being froze once, or that light frost, the sweetness of the carrots were phenomenal. And something you might want to consider is the type of carrot. There are so many types of carrots, but think of the word Nantes, Nantes. It's a variety of carrots that have a sweeter taste to it, and they are delicious. I love them. Now, this very act of planting a seed in the earth has in it to me something beautiful. I will always do it with joy that is largely mixed with awe. When you think about your opportunity to plant a seed in the ground and watch it grow and the potential for a harvest, you can sit there with awe and think about how that actually knows how that little seed knows which way is up, and that it grows towards the sun. And you can just say, you know what? Heavenly Father knew what he was doing when he created gardens. Now, I also invite you to have faith, because it will rain and it will rot your onions and it will blow. The wind will blow and it will knock over your corn and break branches. And it will snow on, let's say, June 26th, like it did 26 years ago when I put my first garden in this yard, and it snowed 2 feet of snow on June 26th. The snow will melt, the winds will stop, the rains will come a little less on occasion, but you need to have faith and plant that garden so that you can feel like you're just a little more part of the creation. My name is Delana Scholes. I'm from the Blackstone Ward. You can call me, you can text me, you can stop by and visit. And I'd love to chat with you a little more about gardening. Have a great day.